I'll be done with the book. Okay. If I take breaks, I'm sorry. I have a little bit of heartburn. Okay. Sam, chapter 32. Letting go. It sounded so easy. He had even tried to make it easy, trading away whatever came across his path, but he knew that letting go of emotions and memories was something altogether different, harder. He wasn't sure he had mastered that yet, but after today, after Sarah, he felt like he was getting closer. You think I'm holding on to something I should be letting go of? Sarah asked, her crossed arms tightening like a shield. The angles of her body, shoulder, elbow, hip, sharpened, kept him at bay. Sam shrugged. You tell me. She was quiet for a long time. He stood next to her, and they both stared across the city at the tallest building in New York. You know, he ventured into the quiet. I've learned that sometimes you can only see what you want to see by changing where you stand. And standing somewhere unexpected can lead to unexpected discoveries. She kept her gaze fixed on the buildings rising into the sky. After some time passed, she said, he promised he was going to take me there today, after he signed the papers. We were going to celebrate by going to dinner, and then to the top of the Empire State Building. Just you and me, just like in the movies, he said. But that didn't happen. Do you know what did happen? She didn't wait for Sam to respond. We spent the whole day apart, and every time we talked today, we fought. The minute we were together again, we fought. We stood in Times Square and yelled at each other and screamed and said. She shook her head once, sharply, as though physically forcing her thoughts in a new direction. Sam bit down on the inside of his cheek to keep himself quiet. He didn't want to interrupt the flow of her words and risk her closing down instead of opening up. So maybe it's good that we're here instead of there, she said, nodding to the building across the way. If he comes looking for me, he'll go there, and I won't be there. Her voice held a dark note of pride and anger. Do you think he'll come looking for you? Sam was keenly aware of the weight of his phone in his pocket. Should he suggest she call her dad? If only to let him know she was okay. Was she okay? Not in a million years. Not after what he said. Not after what I said. There was that sharp shake of her head again. I didn't think it was that much to ask, you know, she said softly. I know his business meeting was important, but I guess I thought he'd still be able to get away for lunch or dinner or something. I thought we'd still be able to do a couple of sightseeing things, explore the city. You did explore the city, he said just as quietly, with you. She turned her back to the skyline. But somehow I'm the bad guy for having fun today. Is that what he said? No, but it's how I feel. Sam took the chance. What did he say? That he was worried about me, that he wanted to make sure I was safe, you know, basic dad stuff. Sam took a bigger chance. What did you say? During the fight or after? After. Sam knew from experience the importance of what happened after. What you said or didn't say, what you did or didn't do. Sarah looked down at her feet. Her long hair swept across her face like a curtain. Her body trembled, and her voice, when she finally spoke, was thin and high. I said that if I had known what kind of man he really was, I would have left with Mom, and I would never have come back either. Sam sucked in his breath as though he'd been punched. I know, right? Daughter of the Year award. Right here. It's no wonder he told me he'd need some time alone after I said that. The wind gusted past them. A group of tourists wandered up, talking and pointing out landmarks. Their laughter was light and carefree, but the noise felt abrasive to Sam. He gently touched Sarah's arm and led her down the walkway toward an empty spot. She walked automatically, directionless, willing to be guided by his hand. When did your mom leave? He asked once they were alone again, or as alone as they could be in the heart of a popular tourist spot. Sarah's mouth twisted. When I was 8. Why did she leave? A bitter laugh escaped. You know, it took me half my life to summon up the courage to ask that question. And it took you like half a second. Do you know the answer? I do now. She shuddered and looked away. Dad told me. He told me everything. You don't have to tell me, Sam offered gently, remembering when Sarah had said the same thing to him in Central Park. Yes, I do. We treated fair and square. You told me your story. I promised to tell you mine if you waited for me. You did. Now it's my turn. She drew in a deep breath. Sam waited, trying to ignore the itch in the soles of his feet that made him want to move, to walk, maybe even run away. But no. As much as it scared him, he knew he needed to hear Sarah's story. He needed to help her shoulder the burden of her past the same way she had helped him with his. I was a love baby. That's what Mom and Dad always said. They said that they loved each other so much that it couldn't be contained in just the two of them. So it spilled over into me. For a long time, I thought that was how babies were made. I imagined a hospital full of little empty baby shells. And when they were filled up with enough love, they came alive. And then the mom and dad took them home to be a family. Sam smiled, but tried to keep it small. She caught him anyways and echoed his smile, though a bit self-consciously. I know, I wasn't the brightest kid growing up. At least you had an idea. When my parents gave me the talk, it came out of nowhere. It was like they were speaking another language, and I was horrified. How old were you? Sam shook his head. Not old enough. That's all I can say. Her shoulders relaxed, and she loosened the death grip she had on her arms, which was what he'd been hoping for. We were a good family. At least I thought we were. We did stuff together, vacations and parties and holidays. Dad was a businessman, suit and ties to work every day. And Mom worked in an accounting firm. She was great with numbers. One of my earliest memories is of her being curled up on the couch next to Mom. Earliest memories is being curled up on the couch next to Mom and watching her do her math problems for work. I thought you said you weren't very bright as a kid, Sam said with just the hint of a tease in his voice. She let the comment slide. Her eyes focused into the distance. When Mom did her accounting, something special happened. She made math look like magic. I mean, where else can you take two different numbers and turn them into something else? Something bigger. And together they always seemed stronger than they were separately. Do you still think math is magic? He asked. It was strange. He'd spent all day with her, had opened up his heart a crack to her, but he still hardly knew her at all. No. When Mom left, it was like she took the magic with her. No more addition, just subtraction and division. Sam rolled his shoulders, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. He wanted to say something, change the subject, change the story, but this wasn't something he could take and trade. This was something he needed to learn how to take and keep. I thought for sure she would come back. Sarah leaned as far over the wall as she could go, which wasn't very far. Sam saw a nearby security guard take note of Sarah and shift his weight as though preparing to come over if she needed help. Sam knew that when you invited people this close to the sky, you had to keep them safe and secure, and somehow keeping her safe had become his job for the day. He stepped closer to her, feeling oddly protective of Sarah, and the guard relaxed. Even though she had said goodbye, I honestly thought she would come back. I made up all these stories about where she was and why she left, like maybe she was just on a business trip. Dad took lots of those all the time. to California to computer conferences, and sometimes he took Mom with him. Sometimes we all went. But I remember wondering if it was a business trip, why we hadn't all gone with her. It was easy for Sam to imagine an 8-year-old Sarah, her face crinkling up with confusion and worry, her small fists hitting her hips in frustration. He'd seen her do the same thing more than once today. Lots of nights I waited up for her, thinking of all the places she might have gone, the store, the movies. I even dreamed that maybe she'd gone out to a ranch to pick out a pony for me. When she hadn't come back by morning, I would ask Dad where she'd gone, but all he ever said was that she had gone somewhere she couldn't hurt us anymore. I didn't understand that at all. I mean, Mom had never hurt me. She was my mom. She loved me, right? Sam knew it was a rhetorical question, but the raw pain in her voice compelled him to answer it anyways. Of course she did. Sarah looked at him, those green eyes of hers cutting him like a laser. Of course? You make it sound so easy, so obvious. But I was 8. I wasn't so sure. When you're 8, all you have are questions. What if she left because of something I did? What if she left because I didn't love her enough? What if she left because she didn't love me enough? I'm sure that's not why she left. Sam started, but his words faltered under the heat of her stare. I know that, she said. Now. She took a deep breath. She left because Dad told her to, and what's more, he told her to never come back. Dude, as a mom, hearing what a little girl thinks, it breaks my heart. Oh my gosh, I could never leave my kids. That was just, sorry, side note for that emotional, hormonal pregnant lady. That just makes me want to cry. Sarah, chapter 33. I couldn't believe I had been able to say the words. Tonight, when Dad had finally explained to me the truth behind why Mom had left, it felt like all the words in the world had turned to dust and ash and bone. The lights from Times Square burned my eyes like fire. The noise roared in my ears like a train. My throat closed up and I feared I might never be able to speak or breathe again. What? Sam said, the lines on his face moving and shifting through horror to fear to disbelief. I know, I said. I spent my whole life thinking that it was my mom's choice to leave, and it wasn't. She left because Dad told her to. The idea still rattled through me, as if a rock had been tossed into a well but hadn't hit bottom yet. I looked down the long slide of the building at the small flickers. I think it means the long side, not slide. I looked down the long side of the building at the small flickers of lights below as cars and buses buzzed along the dark streets. It made me dizzy, but the spinning felt good, almost as though if I turned around long enough or fast enough, I'd be able to change what was around me, or better yet, return to where I started back before all of this happened. Did he say why? I mean, he must have had a reason. I looked at Sam, whose forehead was buckled with worry, and pulled back from the edge. I sat down and leaned against the stone wall, pulling my knees to my chest. I locked my hands around my wrists. I hadn't realized how much my fingers had been trembling until they stopped. Sam sank down next to me, folding his long legs under him, Taylor style. He swung his bag across his hips, tucking it low behind the small of his back so he could lean against the wall with me, side by side. But that left his hands unoccupied, and Sam, never one to stay still for long, tapped his fingers on his knee. I found his familiar fidgeting calming. I leaned my head down, Sam's profile slanted in my vision, his image distorted where my eye pressed against my knee. Dad's reason for sending her away was so obvious, I probably should have guessed it a long time ago. She was cheating on him. Sam's eyebrows rose, but he didn't say anything. The summer before my 7th birthday, Mom stopped going to work. I thought it was because she wanted to spend more time at home with me. She even told me that was the reason. But tonight I found out that she was home because she'd been laid off from her job. I closed my eyes, trying to remember what she had looked like the day she came home from work for the last time. Had she been crying? Was she mad? The only memory I had was how she'd sat down at the kitchen table and taken off her shoe, only to find the heel had been split clean in half. I remembered how she had sat at the table for hours, the broken heel in her hand, crying. Mom loved her job. She loved working and being a part of something important. Dad said he tried to tell her that being part of a family was important too, but I guess there was something in her that wasn't happy at the thought of settling down, of being a stay-at-home mom. Sam scratched at the side of his neck, but he didn't interrupt. Dad said he'd encourage Mom to look for another job. He said he wanted her to be happy, and if working, even part-time, could give her that happiness, then that was a good thing. I shook my head, remembering the look in Dad's eyes when he told me this part of the story. The sorrow, the guilt. So Mom started looking, checking the job listings online, signing up for networking sites. But I guess she had a hard time finding anything that was a good fit. The pay was too low, the commute was too far. There was always something. And then I trailed off. I didn't want to say it. I couldn't. She found what she was looking for, Sam offered, his voice hesitant, laced with fear. The knot in my stomach moved into my throat, more like who she was looking for. The guy, the one she cheated on your dad with. I unraveled the knot enough to speak. I guess she met him on one of those online networking sites. They were both looking for the same kind of job, and they would share tips and review each other's resumes. I guess it got pretty serious pretty fast. I swallowed. The more time Mom spent looking for a job, the worse things got between her and Dad. And the worse things got between them, the more time Mom spent on the computer looking for a job. And I guess at some point, Mom stopped looking for a job and started looking for something else. A way out, Sam suggested quietly. His hand reached for the dog tags around his neck, but he bypassed the chain and rubbed the back of his neck instead. Something like that. I guess the relationship was mostly online, but Dad thinks she met the guy at least twice in person. He's not sure. Mom said she was going out with friends, but by then Dad had his suspicions. Then he found the proof, and that's when they started fighting about it. A lot. What kind of proof? Internet history logs, messages, emails. Dad knows everything there is to know about computers, but I guess there at the end, Mom wasn't trying very hard to keep it a secret anymore. Sam looked down at his hands, which were suddenly still on his legs. Maybe she wanted to be found out. Secrets can be hard to hold on to. It's hard to hold on to a family, too. I felt a small rock of rage harden in my chest, and I sat up straight. But Dad didn't even try. When he found out the truth, he didn't fight for his wife or his marriage or for me. He just told her to go, and she left. The rock turned jagged around the edges. The laugh that escaped my lips was bitter. Of course, she didn't fight either. Most divorces end with some kind of custody case, but she didn't fight to keep me with her. I haven't had any contact with her for more than 8 years. The last thing she said to me was goodbye, and then she left, and she never came back. We've never talked about her until tonight. Not really. Dad doesn't even know where she is anymore. It's like she just vanished. It's almost like she never existed. Tears burned the rims of my eyes, the hot salt stinging like needles. My fingers dug into my wrists. The pain felt good, clean and honest. I don't know if I'm madder at my mom for being stupid and selfish and for cheating on my dad, or at my dad for not trying to save our family. I always knew he was weak, but I didn't know but I didn't know he was that weak. He just gave up and watched her walk away. If I'd known what kind of Man, you really were. I'd have left with Mom, and I wouldn't have come back either. The memory of my last words to my dad filled my mind like a tar, hot and sticky and suffocating. But I wasn't sorry I'd said them. My dad's last words to me were, "Then go." I had a hard time imagining that he was sorry for those words either. "This guy," Sam said after the initial heat of my anger had dissipated into the atmosphere, leaving me cold and trembling. "Did he have a name?" I nodded, my breath choking me now just as it had hours ago, when I'd heard the story for the first time. "Thomas Templeton." I shuddered. I thought it was a horrible name when I heard it. Saying out loud was worse. One day she was Catherine Nolan, and the next she wasn't. She was back at being who she was before she married my dad, before she was my mom. "Did she marry the Templeton guy?" Sam asked, his eyes narrowing as though I had presented him with an unexpected puzzle. I shrugged, a headache beginning to throb at the back of my skull. "If she did, I never got an invitation." Silence fell between us. I was tired. I had hoped that by saying the words, by sharing my story, I would feel better. But all I felt was tired. Tired of hearing the words that had torn me apart. Tired of saying them out loud. But they were branded into my bones now, and I would carry them with me like scars for the rest of my life. The thought pushed me past tired and all the way into exhaustion. "I think I get it now," I said quietly. "Get what?" Sam looked at me confused. "Why you said the accident was all your fault." He tensed up next to me, his fingers falling flat against his knee. "Maybe if you hadn't done what you did, the outcome would have been different. But maybe not. You said the driver was drunk. Maybe he would have hit you anyway. Or maybe he would have hit the car in a different spot and Alice would have lived, but one of your other friends wouldn't have. There's no way to know." I closed my eyes. "And maybe if Mom hadn't done what she did, the outcome would have been different. But maybe not. No matter how many maybes you dream up, you still always feel like it was your fault, like somehow you could have changed things before they couldn't be changed anymore." Sam was quiet, and after the moment had stretched into minutes, I leaned my head against his shoulder. "You want to know the strangest thing?" I asked. Sam's head barely tilted down. It could have been yes, it could have been no. As I was walking away from my dad that last time, all I could think about was those pink sugar packets in your bag, and how much I wished I had one. "Why?" Surprise filled Sam's voice. "Because I knew you could turn one of those sugar packets into the desire of someone's heart. You did it for Jess, and I wanted you to do that for me. I wanted you to take a packet and trade it and change it and somehow turn it into my mother." I closed my eyes, feeling a weariness all the way down to my soul. "I hate it," I whispered, "but as mad as I am at her, at my dad, at everything, there's still a part of me that wants to see her again." Sam, chapter 34. Sam didn't know how long Sarah slept on his shoulder. She leaned into him. Her skin was chilled where the back of her hand touched the back of his. He could almost feel the warmth of his body flowing into her as she slept. Her breath was soft against the side of his neck. It was enough to keep him warm too. He considered it a good trade. As his legs tingled into sleep and his back stiffened, he listened to the murmur of hushed voices and the shuffling of quiet feet. The crowds had thinned on top of the rock. It must be close to closing time. The wind curled over the stone barriers, deeping down to ruffle his hair. For a moment, he thought he wouldn't mind sitting like that forever. When he'd moved to New York, he'd been running away. He had known it then and he knew it now. But it felt like he'd been running ever since, always moving, never stopping. He'd always believed that stagnation killed. And maybe that was still true. but stagnation wasn't the same as stillness, and tonight it was nice to sit and be still. A guard strolled past, flashlight in hand. He stopped in front of Sam and Sarah. Last elevator leaves in 10 minutes. Make sure you're on it, he ordered, but quietly. Sam nodded in understanding, then turned his head slightly to look at Sarah. She might be sleeping in peace, but Sam suspected her dad was still awake, still beyond worried about her. This might be his best chance to help ease his fears. He carefully reached over and picked up her bag from where it sat on the far side of her hip. Sarah stirred but didn't wake. With fingers well trained for months of delving into his own bag of secret treasures, he withdrew her phone. He pressed the text message icon on the phone and found the entry marked Dad. With one eye still on Sarah, he typed in a short, but he hoped reassuring message. This is Sam, Sarah's friend. She's with me. I'll bring her home as soon as she'll let me. Almost immediately after he pressed send, the phone buzzed quietly, and a reply appeared. Where's my daughter? Sam hesitated. Safe. Don't worry, and maybe don't call. She's still pretty mad about things. Let me talk to her. She's sleeping, but she's okay. Yes, you'll bring her home? Promise. This time the reply took a minute to appear. Will you tell her I love her? Before Sam could reply, a second message arrived, and that I'm sorry for what I said. Yes. When he returned the phone to the bag, his fingers landed on her camera. The small rectangle fit nicely in his palm. He could see why Sarah liked it. It felt comfortable, familiar. Setting her bag down again, he powered on the camera and trained the lens on Sarah's face. A faint pink had brightened her cheeks. Her eyes moved under closed lids. Her eyelashes curled down and away. Her lips parted slightly with a sigh. A touch of a button and a quick flash of light, and he'd snatched the picture, saving it automatically on the memory card. He smiled, imagining her face when she scrolled back through her photos from today and saw this one. On impulse, he held out the camera at arm's length and pointed it back at both of them. He couldn't see to frame up the shot, but he pressed the shutter anyway, trusting to luck that he was at least kinda close. The flash fired once again, but this time Sarah's eyes blinked open. She mumbled. What's going on? Sam hurried and shoved the camera back into her bag, feeling guilty that he'd startled her and grateful that she hadn't caught him. Sorry to wake you up, he said. It's time to go. Sarah sat up, rubbing at her eyes with a loosely curled fist like a child might after a nap. A faint pink line creased her cheek from where she had leaned against his shoulder. The pattern matched exactly the black stripe that ran down the sleeve of his hoodie. He felt a strange and sudden flash of pride at seeing it. Even though he knew it would fade, it was already fading. For a moment they were connected, like halves of a whole, and that made him happy. The elevator's leaving and we need to be on it, he said. Oh, okay. Sarah reached for her bag and rubbed her eyes again. Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep. How long was I out? Sam shrugged. I don't know. An hour, maybe? It's almost midnight. Sarah's face paled a shade whiter. She set her mouth in a grim line. That's it, then. That's what? Sam asked. He carefully unfolded his legs, wincing as the blood rushed all the way down to his toes. I failed Piper's challenge. I had until the end of the day, and now it's gone. I missed it. Somehow, I don't think Piper is waiting by her door with a stopwatch, counting down the seconds to midnight. In fact, now that she's dealt with Paul, she's probably forgotten all about her. He cleared his throat delicately. Request. Still, Sarah pushed herself to her feet and swung her bag over her shoulder. She reached down to her hand for Sam, and leaned back, levering him to his feet. It would have been nice to have done something right today. The bottoms of his feet burned. It was definitely past time to be moving again. He took a tentative step forward, testing his weight on legs that still tingled and itched as the numbness wore off. "Can you walk okay?" Sarah asked. Sam tried not to notice the small dimple that appeared next to Sarah's mouth as she frowned, but failed. Taking her picture seemed to have brought all his senses to life. He couldn't stop himself from noticing everything about her. The way the spotlights above the doors cast a halo of white around her face. The way the hem of her left pant leg was folded up in a crooked line. The way she held her breath while waiting for his answer. "Yeah," he managed. "I'll be okay." She narrowed her eyes to green slits as though suspicious of a lie, and then looped her arm around his elbow. "I can help. It's not far." Together they made their way toward the glass doors and then to the waiting elevator. As they descended back to the street level, Sam leaned against the wall, stretching and flexing his toes inside his boots as best he could. It hurt, but in a good way. He felt like not only were his legs waking up, but his whole body was too. "Thank you for visiting Top of the Rock," the elevator operator said with a cheerful grin as the doors opened and the passengers filed out. "Enjoy the rest of your stay here in wonderful New York City." "How can he have so much energy this late at night?" Sarah asked as Sam pointed her towards the exit door. "He's probably said that 1,000 times tonight. Maybe he just really loves his job," Sam said as they pushed through the doors and out into the warm spring night. "It's been known to happen." Sam's cell phone rang. He checked the number. It was one he recognized. What's more, it was the one he'd been hoping to see. He stepped to the edge of the sidewalk, tugging Sarah after him. "Vanessa, I'm so glad you called," he answered. Sarah's eyes brightened. "Hello, Sam." Vanessa's warm voice poured through the connection like honey. "You said not to worry about the time, but I'm surprised you're still up. I was expecting your voicemail." "I'm surprised you're still up." Vanessa laughed, low and throaty. "Oh, honey, Art never sleeps. And when the muses call..." "What is it?" Sarah whispered, stepping closer as though trying to hear the conversation. "Can she help?" Sam breathed in the scent of her hair, her skin, and swallowed hard. His stomach flipped, as though he were still falling in the elevator from 70 stories up. "The artist must answer," Vanessa finished. "Tell me your tale, sugar. Your message said it was important." "It was," Sam said. It is. A friend and I could use your help with an art project. I know it's kind of a strange request, and I know it's way late, but I don't suppose we could come by your studio tonight?" Sarah, listening to his side of the conversation, rose up on her toes in hope. Vanessa hummed into the phone. "Tonight? It would only take a few minutes, I promise." Vanessa's hum turned into a laugh. "Of course you can come over. Art doesn't care what time it is. When it's right, it's right." Sam locked eyes with Sarah and nodded. She blew out her breath in relief. "Thanks, Vanessa. You have no idea how much this means to me." "When do you think you'll be here?" "We're at Rockefeller Center now." "Oh, child. It'll take you forever if you take the subway, even at this time of night. Take a taxi and put it on my bill." "No, I couldn't ask you to pay." "I'm not asking. I'm telling. Take a taxi, put it on my bill." A hint of steel gave weight to her words. Sam smiled. "I'll be in your debt," he warned. "That's what I'm counting on," Vanessa replied, and Sam could hear a matching smile in her voice. "I'll put the kettle on. Hurry along now. The muses are fickle mistresses. They don't like to be kept waiting." Sam hung up the phone and looked at Sarah, feeling more energetic than he had all day. "Still interested in going on an adventure with me?" Her smile was all the answer he needed. He took her hand and headed for Fifth Avenue, where he was pretty sure he could find an empty cab. Even though the night was dark, the city was still bright and vibrant and alive around him. Walking with Sarah, he'd felt like he'd been traveling in the dark for too long. It was time to turn on the lights and see what he'd been missing. We are going to stop right here because thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys are loving the book. We have like, I don't know, 40 pages left. Something like that. So I'm excited. And we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.